For this panel, the question is strategies for Defend the Guard at the State House. There has been a lot of progress made in recent years on Defend the Guard. Certainly, I remember from my old mentor, Representative Aaron Libby, who was mentioned years back, when he sponsored Defend the Guard in Maine in 2011, I think it received like 7 votes in the House of Representatives. And we've come a long way since then. The Bring Our Troops Home organization, professionalizing and mobilizing and working a strategy state by state around the country has been a big part of that. We've seen it pass through several state legislative bodies, but not yet passed to law in a single state because, you know, with the exception of one state somewhere, you know, in flyover country, they call it, right? Every state has 2 legislative bodies, and there's usually a problem in one of them. In New Hampshire, it's the Senate. Though this year, I'm hopeful maybe we'll get a roll call vote on the bill. I'd love to just kind of go down. We can start with Dan and go down the line just for some thoughts and reflections on what have been the most effective strategies for moving Defend the Guard through the legislature, earning support for it, and what have been the most pernicious obstacles to getting there. Dan, you've got the most kind of big picture view from the work you've done around the country on this. We'll start with you. Make sure your mic is turned on. Red is off. You're going to want to press the button, and then it's green.
Marines. So one thing we've done, we heard a discussion yesterday about the real nature of politics. And if you haven't taken the class to learn about how to be a real political leader, and if you don't understand the real nature of politics, then you've got to get into this class. We took that class to heart. Sean Dow, one of the greatest Campaign for Liberty teachers in the country, revolutionized our system, the way we do it. And the first thing we recognize is you have to give your bill champions a complete package. You cannot give them a project or a half-baked idea. They have too many things to do. So we developed a legislative packet that has our bill, supporting documents, promises, statistics, market research. And we give it to them as a complete project, so they literally have to go and turn it into ledge services and have it drafted into a bill. And at the end of it, we make a promise to them that say, if you do this, you submit the bill and you champion the cause, we will bring the Army. And so we know that that has given legislators around the country bold backbone to stand up and fight for the Defend the Guard. Our problem is now we're in 30 states and there's only 6 of us in my entire organization. I have 2 paid people and 3 volunteers plus myself. And we're starting to stretch ourselves thin. The biggest obstacle we're facing right now is obviously the war machine coming in and threatening loss of federal funding, which we know is it's a false flag. And what they do is they tell the legislators, we're going to take all of the equipment that's owned by the federal government, and if they don't have the right to abuse your soldiers and your National Guard, we're going to take away every truck, plane, uniform, screw, bolt, bullet, everything that we've given you, and we're going to send it to another state that doesn't have the Defend the Guard. So that would be our biggest obstacle.
Thank you. And Representative Hymes, I know just this past week there was a roll call vote in the House of Representatives of Maine on Defend the Guard. You got all the politicians on record. Unfortunately, a lot of them, well, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we have a target-rich environment of a lot of politicians who are still resisting, kind of standing up for our National Guard troops. What has your experience been over the last couple years in Maine and particularly in this session with both opportunities and obstacles?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So yeah, it did not go well on Thursday in Maine by any stretch of the imagination. But those that I talked to about it beforehand, because there were a lot of people that hadn't even heard about it or talked about it before, and once they came up to me and spent 2 minutes with me, I got their vote. It didn't take much to get their vote to switch over to it. The biggest issue is both Republicans and Democrats that served in the Guard at some point, as soon as that AG gives them a call and says, hey, we need you to help us out here defeat this bill by getting up and giving a floor speech. That's basically what happened on Thursday. There was a Republican who was a JAG for the current AG for 25 years, and he got up and gave the legal, we're gonna take all your money, they're gonna pull everything out of Bangor and send it to New Hampshire, which I'm sure New Hampshire would like, but they're not gonna do that. Can you hear me now? Sorry. Sorry, I did a lot of speaking this week, especially on Thursday. So and then on the other side of the aisle, it was kind of the same thing. There was a retired National Guardsman that got up and spoke on that side. But it did garner, both independents voted with me on that, and it was about 50-50 Republicans and Democrats that voted with me. It was very easy to sway Democrats to saying, hey, Donald Trump has the power of the entire military. And they're like, okay, then we're going to vote with you. So that was easy on that one.
Much
but,
different experience than 2 years ago when Biden was commander-in-chief.
Yeah,
They were
exactly.
hearing none of it.
And then my argument to them on the other side is that I submitted this bill. I championed this with Eric 2 years ago when Biden was in office. Now Trump is in office. It doesn't matter who's in office. The point is that it shouldn't be happening anyway. So that's kind of the pros and cons. What's been working very well is getting somebody on the Democrat side and the Republican side that served in combat to get up and talk about it, because you could have heard a pin drop yesterday or on Thursday when I was speaking about it, because while the National Guard JAG got up and spoke, he didn't speak about any combat experience that he ever had. He just talked about the lawyer side of the house from it. So it's very important that people in all parties get up that have served in combat and seen what the cost is at the front, and a lot of people listen to that. But at the end of the day, I went up against a 25-year lawyer and somebody else, and that's okay. Bring it up again next time.
Well, oftentimes the most important thing is to get the roll call vote, and you did that. So thank you, Representative. So I'm hearing lived experience and hearing from the combat vets themselves is a big asset. Representative Tom Mannion, of course, you were a big part of the effort 2 years ago that successfully was the first effort that passed a lower chamber for Defend the Guard. And even that spurred on a remark by Pete Hegseth on Fox News before anyone thought he was going to ever be the Secretary of Defense about what a great idea this was. How did we get to that point? And also, I guess since we're speaking about New Hampshire specifically now, Derek, please feel free to chime in on that as well.
Yeah. So last year, we knew that we had a very close majority. It was only like 2 votes, literally, in a 400-member House. So we knew we had to work across the aisle like early on. So that's my very first experience of like reaching across to the progressive Democrats. There are still principled Democrats that are staunchly anti-war, even when Biden was in the White House. And if we didn't have them, we would not have passed it out of the House. I actually have 3 of them as co-sponsors this year, and they all came and testified in support of the bill when it came down. And they just speak from a principled anti-war stance. They said, like, they talk about George W. Bush, the neocons, how horrible that was. And they still remember that. And I know the ones in D.C. don't care. They're going to flip-flop depending on whoever the hell's in the White House. But there are people still in the state legislatures that remember these. And I want to thank them. They're fantastic. And another is like to the combat experience. Like when we have testimony in front of our committee, it is the combat veterans that show up, the guys that are lower enlisted or like lower officers. They show up and they tell stories about like, their buddies come back home. They're all messed up. And then the counter arguments are always just like colonels and above. They show up and they talk about the money. They talk about supplies. They talk about, inanimate objects. They don't talk about the lives of the men that they're supposed to be in charge of. And that's like, to me, it's horrifying. And I think the members of my committee understand this. Like they can see it, even though it's like kind of inside baseball when you have like the enlisted versus the officers, like this stuff about like when you're serving. But I think they recognize that it's like, well, these generals are here. They keep talking about airplanes. These other guys are talking about watching their guys get blown to, the guys in their squad get blown to bits. And I think that resonates with the people on the committees.
Derek, would you like to add and speak to the experience in New Hampshire?
Yeah, sure. So, Tom's right, working with the other side of the aisle. I know a lot of times we're very apprehensive to work with people who are self-proclaimed communists or Marxists or whatever. But, we got to take a lesson from Ron Paul. Ron Paul talked a lot about single-issue coalitions. Work with people to do good, areas that we agree with. We don't need to work with each other on every single issue item. We all agree that these wars need to be stopped for different reasons, right? A lot of times the left is coming from a progressive anti-war standpoint. When we talk with the right, we like to talk about the constitutionality, that we're not following the principles of the republic that we were established with. So these single-issue coalitions, and know who you're talking to, right message to the right person. Don't talk to a hardcore Republican about anti-war principles. They might not really listen to you, but when we talk about the Constitution, those ears perk up and they really want to hear what you have to say. Whether it's politicians or just grassroots, right? Same thing. work with the left organizations. So we've been working with Vets for Peace and New Hampshire Peace Action, left groups, but they turn out in support in committee. They send emails, they make phone calls, they help out, right? So these single issue coalitions are fantastic. On struggles, yeah, I agree. You know, we've got the lower enlisted who show up massively to support this bill. It's usually the higher ups, the officers that show up to oppose. And for some reason, the committees like to take the word of the tag as gospel, even though, and we've actually proved this to the committee a few times, that the tag's not telling the truth. Tom's pointed this out to his committee a few times when talking about peas in the seacoast in Portsmouth. But you can go ahead.
Yeah,
chime
go
in.
ahead,
Yeah.
Tom.
So the whole, so the whole the Pease Airport is like the Air Force base that we have, the National Guard Air Reserve base. It's over by Portsmouth, and they keep talking. They use this nebulous language that they are going to shut down Pease, is what as soon as we lose funding. So what I did is I actually reached out to the Pease Development Authority, the guy who runs the actual airport, and he says the National Guard at that airfield. There's a bunch of civilian employees that work at this airfield. It's a big employer in the region, so it was something that scared one of my committee members. He said to me, the only thing that the National Guard actually does at the airfield is the fire rescue and the air traffic control, and they said they could easily replace them. If this stupid threat, which we know isn't real, where they would pull the National Guard out, it wouldn't affect the civilian employers at all in that area. So the Adjutant General is just coming in and being nebulous and lying.
Yeah. So it would be great if we can find a way to somehow change the perception of the committees, the way that they view these tags, as well as maybe finding some grassroots support among retired officers who can support this bill and testify as a counteract to the officers that show up to oppose.
So I'd like to ask about phenomenon that's. Oh, I hit a thing. All right, seems to be all right. I'd like to ask about a phenomenon which I observed, and I never want a conversation about Defend the Guard to go by that I'm involved in without mentioning my my late friend Sergeant Aaron Rollins. By the way, I think it's worth noting that one of the leading causes of death of so many of our veterans coming home is suicide. And I'll always remember the late Sergeant Aaron Rollins several years ago when it was being presented in Maine, and the Adjutant General came and was talking about, well, you know, if you pass this, you know, we could lose this money or that money. And I just remember Aaron Rollins pulling me aside afterwards and turning to me and saying, you know, he had lost his very good friend in a roadside bomb in Iraq. They were both members of the Maine Army National Guard, and he turned to me and said, you know, I wish that the Adjutant General would tell my buddy's mom that it's okay that he died because the state got a few extra Humvees out of the deal. What do you make of the fact that the arguments that we are hearing today from the opponents of Defend the Guard are not what we may have heard in the early years of the War on Terror, that these wars are so important because we are defending freedom, we are spreading democracy, there is a noble purpose, there is a clear mission, there is a reason why we're over there, and the only arguments we're hearing are, they never touch those things, they never make the case for why we're sending troops over there, they just say, our money is threatened. What do you make of that? Let's start with Derek and let's work our way down.
I mean, obviously, right, we shouldn't be putting price tags on our soldiers, right, first and foremost. But again, when you start examining these kinds of arguments, you know, we like to quote a lot of time our friends in Congress who have asked around Congress, asking if it would be politically feasible to defund a state's National Guard, and of course, it's politically suicide. No one would ever do that. You know, it's in the Constitution that it's Congress's duty to make sure that the militias are well funded. So, you know, not from a moral standpoint, right, it's disgusting that you would talk about soldiers' lives like that, but also just looking at the facts of the situation, those kinds of arguments just don't make any sense.
So I don't want to go on too big of a political tirade about foreign policy, but like the mission has been lost. So like one of the things that the war in Syria is a great example in my opinion. So we have the 2001 AUMF that was meant to go after the people responsible for 9/11 and the countries that harbor them, which is Al Qaeda. That AUMF has been used as justification for all kinds of bombing campaigns across the entire Middle East, and sometimes we're bombing the people that are on the opposite side of Al Qaeda, or we're providing material support for Al Qaeda itself. So in the Syrian conflict, there's an air base that was in Jordan, Chower 22. It's on the border of Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. That came under attack, I think it was 2 years ago. And in that base, they killed 3 Army reservists, but they also wounded 20-something National Guardsmen from across 3 different states. Now, this ties to New Hampshire because our Air National Guard units were there 2 weeks prior to that air attack, and they had just come home. The mission of what's going on there has resulted in Al Qaeda now owning a nation in the Middle East. Al Qaeda now runs Syria. So if the 2001 AUMF was used as justification here, we should be trying ourselves for treason for violating this and supporting our enemies.
Yeah, one thing I'll bring up that was really interesting that happened in Maine. So 2 years ago, the AG that was currently in, he switched out and there's a new AG, Adjutant General up there. At least the one 2 years ago was willing to admit that National Guard troops had deployed to combat zones and died. The current AG, and I asked her on mic multiple times, she didn't know that National Guard went into combat and died and wouldn't say the number on the record this time. The previous AG had, I mean, who knows how sincere he was, but he pulled his wallet out and he had a list of the soldiers that died in the National Guard when they were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. The current AG was just, I don't even know what you're talking about, that didn't happen, kind of completely going away from the fact that the National Guard did deploy and they did die. That's like an honorable thing that an AG should at least recognize. But the current AG in Maine was not even willing to admit that on mic. And that was a huge personal problem for me. And while I will continue to fight this issue in Maine. And then the other part of it is that, and just for some context here, I'm a Navy guy, I understand that. I spent 7.5 years with the teams in Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia and Yemen, so I saw all that, I was there, so I'm not just a Navy guy that was on a ship for my entire 20-year career. I had the combat experience, so please keep that in mind as we're having this discussion, because I got some of that during my floor speech on Thursday as a, hey, what does this guy know? And it's like, first of all, I served for 20 years, and second of all, I did see the combat. It's just not something that needs to be always brought up into the attention. I just want to put that for some context here as I'm talking about this.
Just on that, it's like some of the bravest men I've ever met were Navy corpsmen. So like any of this nonsense, like the Navy guys don't see combat as nonsense. It's an EOD guys, like I've seen a lot of Navy, like it's BS.
So as a former Marine, we get to pick on the Navy, but nobody else does, right? So to the question about why we don't talk about the bigger issues. In World War II, does anybody know what the population of America that actually served in the military was? What percentage? Does anybody have any ideas? 11% of the population served in the armed forces during World War II. Do you know what it is today? Less than 1/2%. So we don't talk about the cost of war on the human side because it doesn't affect 99.5% of the population. We've idolized the military. We celebrate them at the halftime of Super Bowls. We tie yellow ribbons around the trees and we have parades for them and we extend the Purple Highway in your state a mile every year in honor. Well, if you really want to honor veterans, quit bringing them home in flag-draped boxes. Do the thing that would actually honor veterans. Respect the Constitution, that they've sworn an oath with the value of their life to protect the Constitution. Honor that Constitution. So that's why nobody wants to talk about the bigger issues. It doesn't affect them. And so to humanize the cost of war, it's a valuable strategy, and I don't like to use it as a strategy, but it is. It's something we use in committees. We bring in, when we testify in a committee hearing, we like to have people show up that have the emotional story, the personal connection, and then somebody that can argue the facts. Because after all the tears and all the emotion, the committee, all they ever want to hear at that point is facts. And so you have to do both. And it's just so important that we recognize that this is an issue from an extreme minority position, and we are winning. That 0.5% is rising up.
So we have about 5 more minutes, so I would like to go through one more time. I guess the question is, so feel free to respond to this, or if there's another final thought you'd like to share. Looking forward, where the Defend the Guard movement is right now, what are kind of the next steps that you see to get this to the next level? I mean, we got to get it passed at some point through a single state. A single state has to show some leadership to empower other states to follow the lead. Because I know this is what I always hear is that a single state is afraid to go alone and to be targeted by the federal government and to face retaliation in that way. What can we do to embolden a state legislature to follow the advice of Daniel Webster to interpose between the federal government and its militia and to defend the Guard? How do we get to that next step? Let's start with Dan McKnight, and we'll work our way down.
This is easy. www.defendtheguard.us. Go enlist in the movement. Sign up. Put your name on there. We will start communicating with you through our newsletter. I promise we're going to hit you once a week. I promise. Number 2, go back to that website, the homepage, and click on your state, New Hampshire, and look who is sponsoring the bill, and then get behind them. Work with them. Find the activists in the state, because no legislator can do it by themselves. This is the perfect marrying right here of an activist and a champion. When you have that combination, it's rocket fuel, right? Jet fuel plus oxygen, rocket fuel. Number 3, give us 10 to 15 minutes a week and join our phone bank. We are changing committee votes in real time every single week. We start a committee, first thing we do is we whip the committee and we find out where they all stand, we identify the no's, and then we apply pressure, and we're changing votes every week. Derek, how many times have you heard people on the phone tell you they're changing their votes?
I got, I think, 2 text messages from state reps on the committee asking us to stop the phone calls. They're going to support Defend the Guard.
Yep.
To back off, like we get the message.
What do politicians understand? Pain and pleasure, and I am not in the business of pleasuring politicians. And finally, if you can chip in a few bucks, it costs money to fight this fight, and we're funding it with small dollar donors. Only 2 people are paid any amount of money for salaries, but we're in 30 states. I need to hire 50 more people. So if you can chip in, that's what I would say.
I will note that I love your raffle you're doing for that bust of Ron Paul. I entered it because I want to win that bust of Ron Paul. So it goes against my interest to encourage you all to do it as well. I'd rather have less competition, but anyway, it's a great raffle. So anyway, yes, Representative Hymes.
Yeah, 2 things. So as I was getting my floor speech ready for Thursday, I was trying to think through all of the mental backflips that the AG has to go through to do this. And what it actually boiled down to me, and it's something that I had never thought about, and I brought it to the floor on Thursday, is that disobeying an unlawful order would be her easiest escape for all of this. When DC calls up and says, we want to send your National Guard, it should be, did Congress declare war? Okay, this is not within my realm of the Constitution that I swore an oath to. It's an unlawful order, click. So that is the epiphany that I had earlier this week. And I'd just like to share that with you, that's another easy way. And then the other thing is getting engaged at the federal level. Over the last couple of months, and I kind of was behind the power curve on this, was I reached out to Congressman Golden, I reached out to Senator Susan Collins, and I was like, hey, you guys need to start championing this. And they're like, yeah, we really agree with it, and we're going to try to work it down here, but it never really goes anywhere in D.C. So it's really holding Congress and Senate accountable at the federal level, because at the end of the day, either the president should be giving this power back or Congress should be taking it back. Best case scenario, if you have a strong leader in Congress, they take it back. But we all know what Congress's appetite for doing anything outside of their next campaign is.
I do want to note that it was at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum last year that Tulsi Gabbard was here, and we got her on record supporting Defend the Guard as a method to make Congress do its job. So I'm really proud of the fact that the New Hampshire Liberty Forum has played a role in helping to advance the ball for this. Let's go to Representative Mannion.
And I think it was RFK and Vivek did it at PorcFest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and tickets are on sale for PorcFest
Yeah.
right now. You get 20% off with the discount code on the back of your program.
There's
anyway,
a code?
Yes, there's a discount code.
Yeah.
All right.
So to parrot what or repeat what you were saying and what you were saying, the phone banking actually, in my first term, the committee recommendation was tied. It came out of the committee tied, but it wasn't a partisan tie. It was 8 Republicans and 2 Democrats. One of those Democrats pulled me aside before we took the vote on it, and he says, I have been hearing nonstop from veterans I have to vote in favor of this against what the recommendation of the ranking member was. So these phone banks absolutely work. It got it tied out of the committee so that when it came to the floor, the first motion was the ought to pass motion. And that helps. If it came out ITL, that's an uphill battle on the floor because the legislators are lazy. They don't like to do multiple votes. So sometimes they'll just vote ITL just to kill the thing because they don't want to do it here, a second motion. It's as simple as that. So that helps. The phone banking absolutely helps. And then, of course, reach out to your senators in New Hampshire. That is where this thing's probably going next. I hope to get it out of the House next year in January. It's going to the Senate. The Senate killed it last time. We didn't even get a roll call vote. Bare minimum, bully your senators to get them to just go on record. We want the roll call votes because then we can find the targets and we can affect change in the next election.
Before Derek answers, can I, real quick, why do we want a roll call vote? Everybody say it together so we can tie legislative season to election season. Last year, there were 17 members on the committee in Idaho. 8 of them that opposed it, we removed from office in one swoop. You have to hold these bastards accountable. No.
All right, Derek, you get the final word.
Sure, yeah, I just want to touch on the grassroots stuff. So just keeping AFP and Defend the Guard separate, but everything that I've learned about grassroots comes from AFP. AFP teaches great coursework on grassroots activism, power mapping, 5-column analysis, how to motivate your legislature, all those kinds of things, and they do those free trainings all over the state all the time, and that's where I learned everything. But starting with Dan, sign up, get involved, let us know that you want to volunteer. It's my job as one of the lead volunteer activists in the state to find the work that best matches what you want to do, whether it's phone banking, door knocking, showing up in the committee hearing, preparing you to show up for the committee hearing, giving you all the talking points that you need. But it first starts with just letting us know that you actually want to volunteer. We'll get in contact with you. We'll provide you with the training, the knowledge, the resources that you need to be successful in getting this fight, getting this legislation passed. The opposition, they get paid to show up. So we got to really volunteer and be motivated to be the ones to show up because they get paid to show up. They're going to show up every single time. We got to bring ourselves out there.
Awesome. Let's give a round of applause to our panel. Thank you for fighting for Defend the Guard.